Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Additionally, there's a special Black Friday promo code for Magic Singles. From November 22nd to November 26th, you can use the promo code HEROESBF to get 15% off Magic Singles. During that time, there will also be site-wide discounts on sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, sealed product, and much more. See the description below for more details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 2 of our 6-part Ultimate Masters full set review, where today we're going to look at all of the blue cards and some of the multicolor cards that are within the set. Now, if you saw yesterday's video, you kind of know what to expect here. We're going to look at every card one at a time and talk about how it's going to be best utilized in the limited games, draft or sealed. Since these are all reprints, we kind of know what they already do in the formats where they are illegal, so this is truly a limited set review. Quickly before we get started though, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support the channel. Our Patreon page is down there. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon. And finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. And check out the details below, but there is a special promo code for this weekend because it is Black Friday. You can get 15% off singles. All that information is down there, so check it out if you're interested. But as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to each and every one of you. I appreciate all the viewers. But let's get into it. Ether Snipe is our first card today, and you're going to notice as we go through, blue is a pretty interesting color. It's almost like the engine color that makes a lot of the other colors a lot better. This card, though, just generally is a good card. One thing I will point out, it does have Evoke, and we saw some cards yesterday that work very well with Evoke because they're able to juggle a little bit, so that's good to keep in mind, but just generally, this is a strong common on its own. A 4/4 for 6, but it bounces a non-land permanent. That could be something of yours. Maybe you have a good enters the battlefield effect and you want to cast something again. Or it could be something your opponent has and you can tempo them a little bit. Non-land permanent gives you a lot of versatility too, so that's fantastic. And if you can't play it for 6, in a pinch, you can still evoke it for just 3 if you need to. Archaeomancer it's actually pretty interesting this time around. It's an instant and sorcery-centric strategy as it has been recently in a lot of these sets. But it also adds a lot of madness as well as flashback, so it has those extra elements that just make it deeper and more interesting. Archaeomancer might be best in a strategy like that because you're able to take an instant or sorcery, bring it back to your hand for just 4 mana, and you get some board presence, which isn't a large creature, but at least it's something. It's a very solid common again here. Even if you're not in Izzet colors, this is still very useful. There's good instants and sorceries just in blue, and a lot of ways to get cards in the graveyard aside from playing them, so it's another way to just find additional value. This will be playable more often than not. I would just say skip it if I don't have a lot of instants or sorceries in my deck. Back to basics. Now this isn't a great limited card. Obviously it's really cool that they reprinted it for legacy players. I know a lot of folks have been wanting to pick up this card for some legacy builds, but for limited it's not all that exciting. I would pull this out of the sideboard though if my opponent does have a non-basic land that's problematic for me, or if maybe they're getting a little bit greedy with colors and they're using non-basics to pull it off. It is a reciprocal effect though, don't forget. Circular Logic. This is a very interesting card because it kind of sums up in some ways not only what blue's doing, but almost what this whole set is trying to do. It cares about what's in your graveyard. In this case, it can be any card, but the more cards in your graveyard, the better it is. And there's so much of that going on in this set. We see things like Delve, Flashback, we have Reanimation going on. No matter what color combinations you go into, you're going to be caring about what's going on in your graveyard at some point. We're going to see cards today that are looking for instants and sorceries in graveyards. We're going to see cards later in the week that are looking for creatures in graveyards. Graveyards truly, truly matter, and Circular Logic plays right into this. Now, it also has madness, and like I said, discard outlets are definitely going to be a big thing, especially in this color. So you might be able to pull this off for the madness cost quite frequently, as a matter of fact. Other than that, this is a good control card. Don't worry about the stipulations of madness or the stipulation of having things in your graveyard. That's just going to come naturally when you play this game, draft or sealed. But if you don't care about controlling the board all that much, maybe you skip this card if you're trying to be a little more aggressive, although blue is not a very aggressive color, as you're going to see today. There's not even all that many creatures here. But this is a card that is going to be a strong control element for you. It'll be great in Izzet because they really care about madness, and the discard outlets could really start moving your deck along pretty nicely. But this could be good anytime you need to control the board. Doesn't really matter what color combination in this particular set. Defy Gravity. Flashback is going to be great in this set because of all the milling and discarding going on in this color and others. You have dredge cards in green and in black. You have other cards in black that will thin your deck. So having cards with flashback are nice because even if you end up losing them to one of those effects, you still can play the card. It's almost like drawing the card, if you will. And if you do actually draw the card, then you can potentially play it twice. Now, aside from that, what about Defy Gravity? Yeah, this is going to be good if you need to push across damage. This could be good in the Simic deck because you are going to have heroic creatures there. And you also have a lot of large creatures typically in green, and you might need to get them over the battlefield to get their damage across. This could do it potentially 2 times over the course of the game. That's kind of nice. It's also an instant, so it can be a combat trick defensively. White-blue also has heroic creatures, and they also have some real strong auras, which could amplify the power of this card. Deranged Assistant. Alright, let the milling begin. It's a 1/1. It's a little fragile, but this is common. You might be able to grab a few of these, and maybe your seal pool might even have a few of these aside from draft. And this is going to do something that the set cares a lot about. Blue is your engine. Blue's making all the other colors so much better, and this card is good in any color combination. Here's why. White and blue, there's reanimation going on. A lot of great reanimation spells that you'll find in white we talked about yesterday. Populating your graveyard to get to some creatures, that would be great. What about Dimir colors? Same thing. They're also trying to reanimate, and they also have some good flashback spells in there too, so you can find some value that way. What about Izzet? Yep, Izzet works too. They have a lot of flashback, so again, you might just find value. It's almost like drawing a card if you end up milling a flashback card. And green, check, they care too. They have delve cards. Black also has some delve cards too that actually will matter. And aside from that, they have cards like Spider Spawning in green that care about creatures in the graveyard. There's a lot of reasons to use this. As a matter of fact, we're going to see cards in blue that care about what's in the graveyard pretty soon. So this card is going to be a commodity for a lot of builds. I also didn't mention that this card also ramps you with colorless mana, which alone would have made it playable. Dig Through Time. Okay, this is a rare. You won't see it a whole lot. And this doesn't really populate your graveyard, but it does use Delve, so that's interesting to note. It is a payoff for some of the milling that you will be doing. Aside from that, though, yeah, it's a good card. I mean, we know how powerful this card can be. We've seen it even in Constructed. Digging down to find the cards you need when you need them is pretty awesome. Disrupting Shoal. First off, this is an arcane spell. Splice onto Arcane is in the set. Not a ton of it, but just pay attention and look for it. Secondly, this is a rare. You're not going to see it a whole lot. So when you get it, it's a good control card. It exiles the card if you pitch it. It doesn't actually discard it, so it doesn't play well with some of the other stuff going on within the set. But that's okay. A free counterspell occasionally is good, and if you have to pay the mana, you have to pay the mana. If you need to control the board, you'll be happy to see this. Dreamscape Artist. Really solid utility card in this set. It's a discard outlet, and that's a big deal. Why is that? Well, we've been talking a lot about mill. Let's talk a little bit about discard. First off, some of it still applies. Like discarding a card in a pinch, if it still is going to give you value out of the graveyard, is excellent, even if it's just flashback or something. Madness, especially in Izzet colors. Madness will be really, really good at times. But aside from that, it gets better if you're trying to reanimate. Blue-white and blue-black will have reanimation opportunities. Just populating the graveyard with some of these reanimation targets could be really sweet if you happen to draw into them. And remember, in those strategies, you don't have to play creatures that you can even cast. You could play something completely off color, and then know you're going to pitch it at some point and try to reanimate it. If you feel confident in your deck, you might be able to pull that off. This is one of those cards that helps you get there. Also, I mentioned other things will matter in the graveyard as well from time to time. This could put stuff in there to delve later on, or what have you. There's just a million different combinations. This can also fix color. If you're trying to go deep into color, like maybe 4 or 5 colors, for example, then this could help you make that a reality as well. So this does have more than just one purpose. It is also kind of cool that you're also sacking a land, which means more stuff into your graveyard, which could matter. And your lands that you do pull out of your deck come into play untapped. That's pretty cool too. Eel Umbra. Alright, here is one of the Umbras in the set. The only one you're going to find in blue. We saw a lot of them in white yesterday. There's a lot of them in green too. Where is this best? Well, generally this card is just solid because it protects your creature. It has totem armor and it has flash. So if something's going to be destroyed, you could play this on the fly and save it. That's pretty cool. The other ability, +1/+1, isn't that exciting, but that's not really why you're playing this card. Now, where is this best? Azorius and Simic, probably. Again, both of those have heroic creatures, which is kind of nice. You also have hexproof going on the green side, which is pretty awesome when it comes to some of these auras. And just generally, this is going to be a really solid card in those builds. But again, I could see myself playing it in a lot of builds. Flight of Fancy. Here's another enchantment aura. Now, this time you don't have totem armor, unfortunately, but still, this is pretty decent. For 4 mana, you give something flying, so again, that evasion can be really important, especially if you're being more controlling. And secondly, it replaces itself and lets you go a card deeper into your deck. There's nothing wrong with that. Even if you got 2 for 1 to that point, at least you're seeing another card. So I feel pretty good about it. And again, hexproof in green and blue. Nothing wrong with that. Also the heroic cards in green, blue, or blue-white. Foil. This is actually coming to Pauper for the first time, and I do think it's going to see play there. It's a very solid card. So what about Draft and Sealed? Really solid card there too. Again, potentially a free counterspell from time to time. But maybe more importantly in this set, it's a discard outlet that's going to put 2 cards in your graveyard, an island and another card of your choice. We've been talking about why that's important all day, and here's another card that will help you get there. Forbidden Alchemy. Alright, let's keep the mill train going with Forbidden Alchemy and Flashback. So this is going to be best, of course, if you're playing Demure colors because you can use the Flashback, but even on its own, it's still good. Instant speed, you get to look at the top 4 cards. Take one of them, goes to your hand, so you get a little card selection there. Never a bad thing. The rest go where you want them, probably the graveyard. So for all the reasons we've been talking about, that's going to be phenomenal for you. And we have more coming. There's more reasons you want to populate the graveyard. Alright, third verse, same as the first. Frantic Search. Another card that's just going to help you move through your cards, get things in the graveyard, draw 2, discard 2, untap 3 lands. It almost feels like a free spell at instant speed. It's a common. Yeah, this is kind of crazy. I think if you're in blue and one of these other colors or 2 of these other colors, you might actually have too many things to help you do this type of thing. You might reach a point where you're cutting cards that are going to populate your graveyard because you're just going to have so many of them. Glenelendra Archmage. This one's a rare. You're not going to see her all the time, but this is a real solid card too. What I like about this is it costs 4 for a 2/2. That's not exciting. It has Persist though, which makes it hard to deal with. And that ability just really gums up your opponent's plan. If they're going to play any non-creature spell, they're going to have to really think about it, because there's a good chance you're going to be able to hold on to 1 blue and at least threaten to counter it. So it's going to slow down everything they try to do until they can get rid of this thing, maybe not just once, but twice. That's going to be real annoying for them. Great card if you can find it for sure. And you know what? 2/2 in the air and limited is not a bad thing either. Iridescent Drake. This cares about what's in the graveyard, but it also cares about auras in particular. So this is a good card to play with Azorius to get one of those auras back, especially if you milled it into your graveyard. And it could be good in Simic as well. If you don't have a fair amount of aura, skip this one. 4 mana for this when it gets a free aura on it is great, but on its own, it's a little lackluster. Just the Winds. I always like this card. I just thought it was a cool name. It has madness, so that can be very applicable. Bouncing target creature to its owner's hand at instant speed is nice because of the flexibility. You can protect something of yours that's going to be destroyed, or maybe you have a card with a good enters the battlefield effect. You can bounce it, replay it, or you can tempo your opponent. Not bad for 2 mana, or maybe 1 mana. Laboratory Maniac. Of course, Laboratory Maniac had to be here. You're milling yourself, you're thinning your deck so much that why not have a win condition card? This is an uncommon this time, so you'll be able to find these things in a draft probably relatively easily. And also in the sealed pool, you might come across it very frequently. So with that being said, yeah, I don't think I have to explain anymore. With all the milling going on, there's a chance that you could simply win the game by milling yourself. I think the best color combinations for that will probably be Simic or Demure. They both have dredge cards, so if you combine that with what blue's trying to do, you could get through your deck relatively quickly if you really tried. Black has other ways to thin the deck as well, but with everything that's going on in blue, you might not even need to be in those color combinations, and you might still pull it off. Living Lore, you could argue this is better in the Izzet builds because it's looking for an instant or sorcery in the graveyard. In some ways, you're going to find, though, there are cards that are kind of nombos. When you're taking something out of the graveyard or exiling it or something along those lines, even Delve, for example, you are kind of messing up some of the other game plans that you might have by having a populated graveyard. So you do have to balance that and remember that. You might not always play this card just for that reason, perhaps, but it does give you an opportunity to replay potentially a powerful instant or sorcery, so I do like that. Magus of the Bazaar. Alright, we're still populating the graveyard here. Draw 2 cards and discard 3 cards. Again, a fragile creature, but at least it's cheap. Your opponent might try to get rid of it if they figure out what you're trying to do, but this is going to be great with Laboratory Maniac or so many of the other strategies we've been talking about today. And it is a rare, though, so you won't see a ton of it. Mahamoti Jin. This is one of the original cards from Alpha Beta Unlimited. I don't have a lot to say about it. Blue loves creatures like this, big ol' flyers that can be win conditions in a control build. This set isn't necessarily doing anything special with cards like this, but they can still win you games out of nowhere, so if you threw maybe an aura on this or something, you could be having a good day. Meringue River Prowler. Okay, speaking of cards you might want to throw an aura on, this can't be blocked. It also can't block, so that's kind of a drawback. However, if you have a black or green permanent in play, you can actually cast this out of the graveyard, making it very persistent and very annoying. It also plays into many of the strategies we talked about today, but even if it just keeps attacking in as a 2/1, eventually your opponent is going to get whittled down pretty badly if they don't find an answer to this. So if you're in one of those color combinations, this could be very good, but even if you're not, imagine if you're in Azorius colors, you could throw an enchantment on this. It could be very, very solid. Mystic Retrieval, flashback, red and 2, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You might want to play this in Izzet, but even if you're not in Izzet, this could still be good for you in some builds. Getting back an instant or sorcery card, especially if you're milling yourself, could be decent for 4 mana. It's also nice that it doesn't exile itself unless you use the flashback, which is kind of interesting for a card like this. But regardless, it might not always make your build, especially in such a powerful set, but there's definitely some reason to use it. Again, remember though, there are some Nambos out there. Balance your deck accordingly. If you're all in on like delving or something, you might not want to be pulling stuff out of your graveyard. Rise from the Tides. Here's a good payoff card for Izzet, especially. Even though it's making black zombie tokens, it cares about instants and sorceries in the graveyard. You're going to have a fair amount of those in those colors, but again, you don't have to be in those colors for this to be a good card. Maybe even a win condition card from time to time. Now again, think about those Nambos, like the flashback cards and such, because that could matter. Rune Snag. Interesting card here. It's another counterspell that's a common that you might be able to grab a few of these in a draft, for example, and the more you have, the better it gets, right? So if you have some of these in your graveyard, and maybe some of them got milled there, that's okay because your later ones will be better. Doesn't always make your cut. Again, you have a lot of ways to control the game in this particular set, so you might not always need these, and you don't want to necessarily take up too much space in your deck probably because there's so many powerful cards, but this is very runnable. Even as a 1-of, it's okay. Skywing Aven, great way to enable Izzet Madness, or any madness really. It does show up in other colors too. And we've been talking all day why it's important to populate the graveyard for reanimation or for delve or what have you. So much going on with this card, even though it's just a little 2/1 for 3. It's also very persistent. If someone's trying to destroy it, you could save it, bring it back to your hand, play it again, and they have this 2/1 that they might not be able to deal with in the air. Sleight of Hand, not a lot to say about this one. Nice cheap spell, lets you move through your deck, hopefully find what you need. It's at sorcery speed, but it only costs 1, so that's just fine. Might not always make your cut. There's so many good options in this set, but it's decent. Alright, there's Snapcaster Mage. Believe it or not, this is the first box topper we've run into so far in our set review. Whenever we do get to a box topper, though, I will show it on the right side. This one's a mythic, so you're not going to see it a whole lot. Now, it's kind of funny. Yesterday's video, we actually had no mythic cards, which is pretty crazy. But today, we got some mythics, and this is one of them. Snapcaster Mage is a good limited card. You might argue it's not quite as good in limited as it could be in some constructed builds, but I think it's still really solid. In limited, sometimes decks, whether it's draft or sealed, do tend to be more creature-centric, and you have less targets for this, but I think you're always going to have enough targets for it to matter, especially in this set. And you know, sometimes just flashing in a 2/1 for 2 and surprising your opponent could be relevant as well. Stitch Drake. This is a good card, a 3/4 flyer for 3, but you do have to exile a creature card from your graveyard. So maybe this isn't always a turn 3 play for you. Maybe it's a turn 4, turn 5 play, but is it bad on turn 5 or turn 6 even? No, not really. It's still a really solid flyer, especially considering you might be able to throw an aura on this if you're in Azorius or something like that. Could be really good. Aside from that, though, it's somewhat of a Nambo with some of the other mechanics in the set because you are exiling a card from your graveyard. Stitcher's Apprentice. It's hard to say any card today is not good in limited because, let's face it, this is Ultimate Masters. These are powerful cards. But because there are so many powerful cards, there's a lot of good ones that aren't going to make your cut, and I think that's going to happen to this one a lot of the time. Having said that, it's still very playable. First off, we haven't seen a lot of 2-drops in blue, and you need your 2-drops, so you might just need to fill out your curve with a card like this. Secondly, it's just kind of nice to have. If a creature's going to die anyway, sometimes you can use this and get a 2/2 out of it, which is pretty cool. In red, there's a card that steals a creature temporarily, so you might be able to steal an opponent's creature, a good one, attack in with it, and then just sacrifice it and get a 2/2. That's always sweet. In black, you have some cards coming back temporarily, like just for the turn. So you bring them back, attack with them, and then you can just simply get rid of it and still get something out of it. That's nice. And you see a little bit of that in red too, with like Through the Breach, if you're lucky enough to get one of those. So there's a lot to do with this card in the set, but maybe you don't always run it. Stream of Consciousness. Okay, this is an arcane spell, so do take note of that. There's 2 ways to look at this card. The first is I'm milling myself, I don't have a Laboratory Maniac in my deck, and I'm worried about decking myself at some point. It's a nice little panic button to slow things down and kind of pump the brakes, and later in the game you could shuffle up to 4 of your best cards into a thin library and have some pretty big plays down the road. The other way to look at this is if your opponent's trying to do anything out of their graveyard. If they're going to target a card in their graveyard, like for reanimation or something along those lines, you could pull this out at instant speed and kind of mess up what they are doing by forcing them to shuffle the target card back into their graveyard. So notice it's target player. It's not just you. It can be you or the opponent. Shuffles up to 4 target cards, so you get to choose the cards in either scenario. In that case, you could really kind of mess somebody up on the fly, and they might not see this coming for just 2 mana. I would only main deck this card if I really was all in on mill, because I do think it could be okay there, but even then I don't know if I always run it. Definitely, I will take it out of the sideboard, however, if my opponent is going to their graveyard a little too often. Here's another blue 2-drop at common, so again, you might just need this simply as a curve filler, but it also mills you and gives you board presence at the same time for 2, nothing wrong with that. Again, it plays into the strategies we've been talking about all day. Talran Sky Summoner. This is a rare. You won't see a ton of it, but it's a very solid card, especially Izzet colors, which you know you're going to have a lot of instants and sorceries. Black and blue, Dimir 2, they're going to have flashback going on, so it's just more activations. That's kind of nice. This is fragile, but if you can control the board and make a few flyers, sometimes you can just win that way. Temporal Manipulation. You got the box topper on the right, another mythic. You're not going to see a whole lot of this one in Draft or Sealed, but when you do, it's a good card. Taking an extra turn is never a bad thing, right? You could argue it's better if you have a lot of creatures, so maybe if you're in an Azorius build and you have some flyers or something, getting that second combat phase could be really important. Could even slam the door on a game sometimes. But if you're behind, this isn't as good. Not the worst thing in the world. It gives you an extra turn to at least draw a card and try to get deeper into your deck. Even if it just replaces itself, it buys you a little time to try to figure out what you're doing. But for the most part, this is great because it can end a game early before your opponent can stabilize sometimes. Think Twice. Real cheap instant. It has flashback. What's not to like here? Helps you move through your deck. Yeah, this is going to be great, especially if you care about instants and sorceries. Also with flashback, if it gets milled, it still has utility. Treasure Cruise. I mean, great card, right? Traditionally, if you can draw 3 cards for like 1 blue mana, we found out that that's pretty good. So this card actually could do that from time to time. But even if you're still paying maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 for it, it's still really not bad. Now remember, delving is going to eat into your graveyard, which could matter depending on what else you're trying to do. And Treasure Cruise is one of those cards I don't think you need like 2, 3, or 4 of. They get worse the more you have in a limited deck. So for Draft and Sealed, I'm happy with probably just 1. Unstable Mutation. Old school card here, and it's a fantastic aura. Giving something +3/+3 for just 1 blue is very powerful. Imagine putting this on the unblockable card we saw earlier, or a flyer, or just any small creature early on in the game before your opponent can really handle it. You could be doing some big damage. And then again, remember the Azorius combos with Heroic, or the Simic combos with Heroic, as well as some of the Totem armor that's going on in those 2 colors, and then the Hexproof that's in green. Even with that drawback, quote unquote, there are a lot of reasons to play this. Visions of Beyond. Now I can draw 3 cards for 1 blue at instant speed. It gets better and better. This one's a rare, and yes, it does require some setup, of course. You have to have at least 20 cards in your graveyard to do that, and if you don't, you're just replacing it basically, which sometimes is fine on the fly too. Does it always make your cut? Maybe not always if you don't have a lot of mill going on or a lot of ways to populate your graveyard. In that case, you might have better card draw spells sometimes. Whirlwind Adept. Really solid creature here. It's a 4/2 for 5. Now, usually I'm not a fan of creatures like that, but Hexproof and Prowess changes all that real quick. It's also common, so you'll be able to find these. First off, we've been talking about how green has had some hexproof. Well, here's a hexproof creature just right in blue. So you can play other colors aside from green and take advantage of the auras. So Azorius is going to love this card, in other words. Also, Prowess is kind of nice. We've seen a lot of good non-creature spells. There's a lot in this set. Obviously, maybe Izzet colors could exploit that more than anything, but no matter what color combination you're in, you're going to find triggers for Prowess. This is a very solid creature. Okay, let's look at some multicolor cards starting with Dimir and Counter Squall. This one's okay. It's another counter spell. This time it only can target non-creature spell, which is not a bad thing. Granted, typically in limited, I would say a lot of times the problems are going to be the creatures, and that could still be the case depending on what deck your opponent's playing. But you know there's a lot of good non-creature spells here, so main decking this, I wouldn't fault anybody for that. It is 2 on color with the blue-black, so it makes it a little harder to cast than other counter spells that we've seen today. So maybe it doesn't always make your cut, but it's very playable again. The controller losing 2 life, well, that's not all that consequential, but it's something. Dimir Guildmage. First time in Pauper, and this is another card that could have big implications there, I think. In Limited, another real solid card. It's all about flexibility. First off, a 2/2 for 2, you know how I feel about that. And the hybrid mana gives you a little more flexibility. And then those abilities, it doesn't tap, notice, so you can just pour mana into them. They are mana sinks, drawing cards or making somebody discard cards, which again can be any player. So you could make yourself discard if that's relevant, or of course make your opponent discard, let yourself draw some cards. Maybe your opponent is getting close to milling themselves out. You might have them draw some cards, get them in trouble. Awesome, awesome card here. Let's move into Is It with Blast of Genius. This one's weird. It costs 6, but it's actually pretty decent. Here's the drawbacks. Choose any target. You got to do that first. So you don't want to choose a large creature because there's a chance you're not going to kill it. Maybe a small creature. There's still a chance you might not kill it if you don't get lucky. If you choose the opponent, well, okay, maybe you'll do some damage to the face. I like that flexibility, but it is high variance. Although, on the plus side, this card does more than just damage. You also draw 3 cards and then discard a card. So there's another discard outlet, which we've been talking all day, why that's a good thing. This is in the right colors to exploit madness. And drawing cards is never a bad thing either, right? So I do think this is very playable. Maybe it doesn't always make your build because you do have a lot of good spells to choose from in these 2 colors. We saw the blue today. Red will be coming up later in the week. But every once in a while, I can see myself playing this. Fire Ice. This is another card that is going to be in Pauper for the first time, and another really good card. So a few cards in this video to watch in Pauper today, but this one in particular, very good instant. It's just really cheap, gives you flexibility. It's a split card, so it can work in a variety of different decks. You don't have to have both these colors to utilize one or the other. And 2 damage on the fly at instant speed, split up. It can go to the face as well as creatures. That's nice. And then the other side will cantrip and tap a target permanent, not just creature, but permanent. Last card we'll look at today, Leovold, Emissary of Trest. It's a mythic. You're not going to come across this guy too much, but when you do, you'll probably be happy. There's the box topper 2 on the right. Now, 3 different colors, but very, very good card if you're in these colors or splashing one of those 3. This card is worth splashing for, no doubt. A lot of the cards we've been talking about today are worth splashing for, but this one especially. 3/3 for 3, granted 3 different colors, shuts off any extra card draw that your opponent can get. So they still can draw a card per turn, but nothing more. And beyond that, you don't have that drawback, so you can draw cards all day long if you want. And in this set, there's going to be a lot of card drawing going on. Secondly, whenever you or a permanent you control gets targeted by an opponent, you get to draw a card. Even if they just use pinpoint removal and get rid of this, it replaces itself and you didn't pay all that much for it. Extremely awesome card. Okay, with that being said, that is part 2. Now, we're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to look at all the black cards and a few more of the multicolor cards. Saturday, we're going to take the day off and we are going to do our regular market watch as we always do. And then we'll pick this up Sunday, Monday, wrap things up on Tuesday. Until next time though, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon and have a great day.